and welcome to lesson 4.1 in the Python tutorial 2.0 series. Today we're going to be taking a break from for loops and some of the stuff we've been doing in the earlier lessons, and we're going to be looking at user-defined modules here. The reason I decided to do a video on this is there's actually been quite a few comments over the past 6 months or so that have asked about how to do this, and it's something that hasn't been addressed in any of the previous tutorials I've done on this channel. So let's go ahead and get started with lesson 4.1, how to create your own user-defined modules and import them into your program. Okay, so here we are in our Python programming environment. To give you the example of how to import your own user-defined modules, we're going to write a small program over here, and what we're going to do is just make a small menu that prompts the user to print arrows on the screen, maybe a left, right, up, and down arrow, and we're going to do that through a menu. So let's go here to our programming window, and we're just going to say, we'll use some simple print statements. We won't make this spend too much time on this, so we're going to use a 1 to represent a left arrow, and I'm going to use a 2 to represent a right arrow. Use a 3 to represent an up arrow, and a 4 to represent the down arrow. And let's go ahead and close that out. And we'll finally end up with a response for an input statement. So input, enter the arrow you wish to print. We'll use an escape sequence. And let's go ahead and run that program and see if it's working correctly. So we'll press F5, and I'm going to save this. And I'm going to save this as, we'll call it main.py. So this will be my main file. Now this will become important because we're going to create another file later that we're going to import. Sorry. So right now I've got this menu on the Python shell over here, and I can choose left, right, up, or down, but of course nothing will happen based on what I enter. But I can use a series of if checks to put in some placeholders here. So let's just do an if check and say if response equals 1, and we'll print, for right now, we'll just use a placeholder value of left, elif response equals 2, print right, elif response equals 3, we'll print up, elif response equals 4, we'll print down. So all those will be placeholders, and we will replace them with graphics here shortly. And then finally we'll do an else clause that says like invalid response. And that should all be pretty simple, so let's make sure we're printing left. And of course that gives us invalid. It's been a while since I've written a program like this. We need to make sure that this is being entered as an integer. So let's convert our response to an integer to make sure that we're either turning the response into an integer or checking the string of 1, 2, 3, or 4. So that should fix that problem right there. So 1 gives us a left, awesome. 2 is right, 3 is up, and 4 is down. So this program, in theory, is working, and even though it's not a really useful program, it is doing what we intend it to. So now that we have the shell of this program, what we want to do is we want to replace left, right, up, and down with maybe some ASCII art that represents those 4 objects. If you remember back to when we programmed In the Realm of the Dragon, that was pretty early on in the Python tutorial series, we introduced the concept of ASCII art. And what we did was we created some variables that took up a lot of space in our main program. Now, if you're anything like me, I need everything to be pretty well organized. And when you start getting to ASCII art and really user-defined functions, sometimes you don't want them cluttering up your main program here. This main program is set to print left, right, up, or down, and I don't want to clutter the code up with thousands upon thousands of lines of different graphics. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a module that this program right here will access, where we can put a lot of that stuff that I don't want in my main program. To give you an idea of what I'm talking about, let's go ahead and put some ASCII art in our main program right now. If you remember, the site that I usually go to for my ASCII art is chris.com, and I've already got that set up here. And so when you go to chris.com, if you're following along here, I just went to the Objects panel here on the left, clicked on Arrows, and here I have my up, down, left, and right arrows. And so I'm going to add these as variables to my program. So I'm just going to copy and paste this right here. And I'm going to head back into my programming environment, and I'm going to create a variable called up that is equal to the string value. And I use the 3 delimiters there to note that I'm going to kind of keep this format right here. I'm going to keep all the enters. So there's my ASCII art for up. Let's get an ASCII art for down. So the down variable will equal that down graphic. We're going to create a right arrow. So let's create a variable right. And finally, let's create our left arrow. So all I'm doing is copying and pasting these ASCII art characters into my program where they can be accessed here in my if block. So now instead of printing left, right, up, or down, I'm going to access those variables, left, right, up, or down. Let's go ahead and pull up our shell as well. And if I've done this correctly, when my user selects 1, 2, 3, or 4, they should get the arrow on the screen as opposed to the text left, right, up, or down. So I'll run this program. When I press 1, there's my left arrow, there's my right arrow, there's my up arrow, and there's my down arrow. So I have kind of a working program right here. See, I don't like that right there, so let's just get rid of that. But at any rate, this program is doing what it's intended to do. However, as a programmer, one of the things that I'm trying to avoid is I don't like having this at the top of my program. This is a lot of information. While it doesn't break the program and it doesn't have a huge impact, I want this to be my main program right here. I know this is the things that I'm going to be editing. I want this artwork to be housed somewhere else where I don't have the top of my program completely cluttered with artwork. I imagine if I was making a game that had thousands of different art assets, it would be pretty irritating to have to scroll through thousands of lines of code to get to this little bit right here, which is the only actual program. So what we're going to do is we're going to move this artwork into our own user-defined module so that we can still access this right here, where we can still have control over this, but it's not kind of mucking up our main program here. To do this, I'm going to go to my Python shell and I'm going to create a new window. So I've got this new window up here. And I'm going to go ahead and save it. So let's go File, Save As. And I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to call this artwork.py. And this was saved in the same directory as my main.py. Now what I want to do is I want to take all of these art assets right here, all of this ASCII art, and I'm simply going to cut them out of the main program here. I'm going to paste them here in artwork. So let's go ahead and save both of these. I'm going to press Control S on both of those windows, and you can see they've now been saved. If I run my program now, my main.py, I'm going to get an error because I've taken the left variable no longer exists in this program. That's because I've taken that left graphic and I've moved it here to artwork.py. I need this main program loop to be able to access this artwork. And to do that, I'm going to have to import it. Because these two are in the same directory, I'm going to import artwork. I don't need the .py in the end, and what you import is just going to be your file name of whatever the second file you create is. If this works correctly, when I run this main.py, I shouldn't get an error. Now the trouble is, this still gives me left is not defined. That's because in order to access information from this artwork file, it's imported correctly. But now artwork is going to be a prefix to those variables. So instead of just simply accessing left, I'm going to access artwork.left. This tells Python to go to the artwork import, which of course you wrote yourself, and then look for a variable called left. Same thing with right. I can do artwork.right, artwork.up, and artwork.down. As long as we've imported artwork, you can see that we have access to everything that's in that artwork file simply by putting that artwork prefix and then calling the variable from there. So we're looking for the down variable that's in the artwork module that we created earlier. If we run this program now, it should be back to working correctly. So I press 1, and there's my left arrow. Setting up your program this way really helps you keep your code a little bit more organized, a little bit easier to work with. Everything that I need for art is located over here, and I know when I add new art, I'm just going to add it to this file right here. When I'm looking to change graphics, I don't have to go searching through thousands of lines of code. I know everything that I need is located in my artwork file. In the long term, as you write more advanced programs, you may import 2, 3, or even dozens of different Python files that all work together so that your main program remains clutter-free. So here we are in the Lesson 4.1 Challenge Program. The Lesson 4.1 Challenge Program is going to incorporate everything that has been in the second half of the Python tutorial series. It's going to have you practice for loops. And really, this program is the pointless numbers game because you would never write this program other than to practice some of these skills. But this program here will challenge you to use for loops and recall a lot of the stuff from the earlier Python tutorials. So the first thing this program is going to do is prompt the user to enter 5 even numbers. So let's enter 2, 4, 6, 8, and if I screw up and enter an odd number, the program will let me know to enter only even numbers. So we'll add a 10, and then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to add 5 odd numbers. So I'm going to add 1, 3, 5, 7, and if I mess up and enter even numbers on accident, the program will not let me enter even numbers when it's prompting me for odds or vice versa. So let's go ahead and add a 9. Then the program will print the even numbers that the user has entered, print the odd numbers that the user has entered, and then combine it into a randomized list of every number the user has entered. Once you've randomized the list of numbers that the user has entered, you're going to use a for loop to identify the last odd number in your randomized list. In this case, the last odd number is 1, and that is correct because my last 3 numbers are 4, 6, and 10. The next thing your program will do is identify the first even number in the list. In this case, it's a 2. So we've identified the last odd, the first even, and then we're going to add those 2 numbers together. So we're going to get 2 plus 1 equals 3. And if I run that program again, we can use different numbers. So we'll use 500, 7002, 654, 4, and 598. So those are my even numbers. They're a little bit bigger. For odds, we'll use 1111, 1115, 799, 777, and 903. Our program can identify those numbers. It can give me those numbers in a randomized list. It can identify the last odd number as being 799. It can recognize the first even number as being 654. And when I add those 2 numbers together, I get 1453. It should be noted that there isn't any specific reference to importing your own user-defined modules. In this, you could do this all completely in one program, but what I did just to kind of practice these skills is all of the functions that go through and identify the different numbers are located in a different Python file. So if you want to practice importing modules, I would recommend writing several functions, one to identify the proper even number, one to identify the proper odd number, write those user-defined functions in another Python file, then import those and call them similar to what you saw in the video that was presented today. But that's your challenge program right there. And of course, that's going to do it for lesson 4.1 in the Python tutorial series. So moving on, I think what we're going to do next is we're going to start a new series. One of the things that I want to do, especially now that we've finished for loops, is I want to write a game start to finish, but it's going to be a little bit larger game. So in our next video, we'll go ahead and start writing a game of Hangman and kind of do some lessons that build the skills that are necessary to write a game of Hangman. So as always, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I will do my best to help you out any way that I can. And thank you so much for your support of the Python tutorial series, and have a great day.